3 more weeks of closures. Triad businesses are holding their collective breath. Health experts weigh in on the decision. Masks are required starting tomorrow afternoon. Why this badge claiming immunity isn't for real.
Let's hear from the woman who lost a loved one in a nursing home, what the problem looks like nationwide. We begin tonight with a Guilford County community stunned at the loss of 4 teenagers. They died Monday after a car crash on I-85. Tonight,
loved ones came together to honor them at a Candlelight vigil. WFMY News 2's Grace Holland is live in Gibsonville. Grace, you spoke to some of the students' family and friends.
The principal summed it up best. This is not how he hoped that the Eastern Guilford High community would be reuniting, to mourn 4 of their own. But he says it was important for them to do that with masks and social distancing so they could grieve.
To the families, there's nothing I can say that will make you feel any better. It's not going to take the pain away.
We showed up for you. We showed up because we care. We showed up because we want you to know that we stand shoulder to shoulder. Look at the track. Students standing shoulder to shoulder. There's unity all over this place.
Well, I knew all of them, but I didn't really have a close friend connection like I did with Justin. And it's so sad that his life was just cut short to 15. You know, it just teaches us a lesson that you can't take life for granted.
They all made, really good grades. They were all well-rounded. Just couldn't ask for a better group of young men, and just such a tragedy to lose them too early.
Every time we walk on this field, may we remember our Wildcat brothers, Big Mo, Devon, JP, and Sequoia. We're going to end with this, one last thought, and this is for everybody standing around. Tell people you love them more times than you think they should hear it.
The principal tells me that counselors have been made available to classmates that are grieving. He also says that those 4 students' memorial services will be held this weekend.
Grace, thank you. A 5th student involved in that crash is still in the hospital tonight.
Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest says he's suing Governor Roy Cooper, claiming his executive orders violate state law, specifically the Emergency Management Act. So what are Forest's points and what power does the government have? Let's dig a little bit deeper. Today, Forest wrote in a letter, the governor has repeatedly ignored the law, enacting mandates without concurrence from a majority of the Council of State. Now, when you take a look at the Emergency Management Act, you can see why he says that. In Part B, in Section 1930, it reads, during a declared state of emergency, with permission of the Council of the State, the governor has the power to establish economic controls over all resources and to regulate the congregation of persons in public places. The governor's office responded, saying Cooper can pass these orders when local control of an emergency is insufficient to protect lives and property, and that's true. Back to the Emergency Management Act. Part C in Section 1930 reads, during a state of emergency, if the scale of the emergency is so great that it exceeds the capability of local authorities to cope with it, the governor can impose restrictions on operation and businesses and other places people may congregate. It makes no mention of getting permission from the Council of the State, but in Forest's letter, he claims, I do not believe any provisions found in the Emergency Management Act eliminate the requirement of the Council of State approval. Cooper's office says all of this comes down to politics. They responded to Forest's letter saying there is no room for politics during a pandemic. Now, it is important to note here, Cooper will face Forest on Election Day in the race for governor. We'll let you know what happens next with this lawsuit.
State lawmakers are trying another way around Governor Cooper's executive orders. Tonight, the Senate adopted a bill that only reopens gyms. Bars aren't included. Plus, they removed a controversial clause that only let the governor reclose businesses if he got permission from the Council of State. They call it a clean reopen bill. Now, many businesses are waiting to see what happens next. Right now, they have to stay closed for at least 3 more weeks. A Triad health expert told WFMY News 2's Itanese McMiller certain businesses are at higher risk.
We lost some clientele.
From a financial standpoint, it has been really tricky, and that is that business side of me going, we need to be open.
But that won't happen anytime soon for Summer Sides, owner of Greensboro Downtown Yoga. She can't open until phase 3.
My heart knew that I couldn't continue to encourage people to be healthy and well through a yoga practice while also saying you could get this condition coming into the studio.
Sides says the governor made the right decision.
Now, people are just tired. You know, they want to get back out. They want to move. You cannot confine us and expect for us to continue to be healthy individuals. It does not work that way.
Trevor Kuntz is the owner of Rock Fitness in Greensboro.
We're going to make sure that we're sanitizing, make sure that everything's clean.
But James Wyatt, chief medical officer at Moses Cone Hospital, says that may not be enough.
When people do certain exercises, they tend to form more droplets than others, especially when they're lifting weights. They tend to sort of strain and perhaps spray a little bit more. And some of these droplets can be around for a long period of time.
Dr. Wyatt knows wearing a mask is difficult when working out, and so is cleaning equipment properly between uses. He says bars are also a bigger risk.
Social distancing tends to go away in that environment. In a restaurant, you can control it to some extent by, moving the tables further apart and so forth.
Dr. Wyatt says restaurants have a lower risk factor because in most instances you're around family, not exposed to as many people, and there's less movement and socializing than at a bar. And Dr. Wyatt says there's nothing definitive saying you'll get the virus if these businesses open, but he says holding off is the safest thing to do as the number of coronavirus cases continues to grow.
Guilford County Representative John Hardister says he's worried about the impact the pandemic is having on those businesses. He says there has to be a better balance of keeping people safe and saving the economy.
I think that the vast majority of our citizens are willing to do what's right, but we've got to get these businesses reopened, because if the economy were to falter, you're going to have a different set of problems. It's going to be really bad.
Hardister says leadership was kept in the dark until the governor's announcement yesterday.
Many want to know how cities and counties plan to enforce this new mask rule. We reached out to several triad departments. Greensboro and High Point police say rather than enforcement, they'll focus on educating and encouraging voluntary compliance with the order. The Rockingham and Alamance County sheriffs say deputies will not cite or arrest anyone for violating the mandate. The Rockingham County Sheriff's Office says deputies will respond to trespassing calls if a person not wearing a mask refuses to leave a business. Some sheriffs outside the triad say they won't enforce this mask mandate at all. The sheriffs of Craven, Halifax, and Sampson County, all near the coast, say the order violates the constitutional rights of their citizens. They say they can't criminally enforce the face covering requirements of this order.
Well, some are trying to find a way around wearing a face mask, going as far as to making false documents. Take a look at this. The State Justice Department says you should keep your eye out for these. An apparent face mask exempt card. It includes a logo from the FTBA, or the Freedom to Breathe Agency. Well, that is not a real government agency. U.S. Attorney Matthew Martin of the Middle North Carolina District wrote, "Don't be fooled by the chicanery and misappropriation of the DOJ Eagle. These cards do not carry the force of law."
Today was significant for our state's coronavirus data. 1,000 new cases doesn't sound special, but you've got to see what that number did to the average. This graph shows the past 5 weeks of our daily confirmed cases. You can see we've had plenty of ups and downs along the way, mostly ups. This dotted line right here is the 14-day average. I want you to focus all the way over here on today. Today's bar is much lower than yesterday's. And look at how that affected the dotted line. It starts to trend downward. When I first saw that decrease, I thought maybe testing was down. I was wrong. We performed nearly 20,000 tests today, the third highest day since the pandemic started. And only 5% of those tests came back positive. We haven't seen a percentage that low since mid-May. Yes, today is just one day, but if we can start stringing together more of these similar type days, we can start impacting that average line that state leaders are watching.
A longtime Triad state senator says he is stepping down. Jerry Tillman has represented Randolph and Guilford counties for 18 years. Before his 9 terms in Raleigh, the Republican was a teacher, coach, principal, and assistant superintendent. He said his greatest joy in serving has always come from helping people with their everyday needs.
The High Point police chief is addressing concerns over police brutality. The department got a letter calling out officers' actions at a Walmart 3 weeks ago. This video has about 200,000 views on social media. It shows a football tackle-like arrest. Chief Kenneth Schultz said he had to address it, especially in today's climate. WFMY News 2's Jess Winters has a closer look.
Because of the situation we find ourselves in, I think I need to address this publicly because I think it's very damaging.
To be clear, High Point Police Chief Kenneth Schultz thinks this letter accusing his officers of racially charged excessive force is damaging after a month of community relationship building, but says this cell phone video evidence is clear. His officers did what they had to.
Turned out there's disturbance inside. A group of people gathered around were threatening the guy that you saw being escorted outside. Our officers decided for his safety, they should escort him outside.
After a fight inside, police say this man was escorted out. Then came a surprise punch to the back of his head.
A gentleman came running up from behind, struck him violently in the back of the head, trying to run from our officers.
So an officer took the suspect down. And though the video moves around a lot, you can see he's no longer on the ground a minute later.
If we're doing wrong, we will admit that. We will go forward. We'll advance from that. If we're doing right, though, we need to support these officers.
In that same meeting, Chief Schultz announced his retirement. He's been with the department for 30 years. He's been the chief since 2016.
A North Carolina police chief fired 3 officers on his first day on the job. Chief Donnie Williams of Wilmington says it was the right thing to do. According to documents from the department, a dash cam recorded the officers making profane comments about recent protests. One officer used the N-word to describe a suspect. Another went on to say, "We are just going to go out and start slaughtering expletive N-words, wipe them off the expletive map." That will put them back about 4 or 5 generations.
There is no place for this behavior in our agency or our city, and it will not be tolerated.
City Council released personnel files for all 3 men and discouraged any other state law enforcement agency from hiring them again.
Governor Cooper signed an important criminal justice reform bill today. It clears the way for young people to get a so-called second chance after crimes committed when they were young. The Second Chance Act builds upon recent laws that allow people who committed crimes when they were kids to remove obstacles in background checks for employment and housing. Cooper said we can give people who make amends for past mistakes the opportunity to clear their records.
Well, it was a beautiful night across much of the area, but there was a couple of thunderstorms. I want to highlight one in particular. In the Reedsville community, really in southern Rockingham County, you saw this storm blow by your area right there between the 9 and 10 o'clock hours. We had a good amount of wind, a lot of lightning, and also a heavy rain burst or two. That storm now kind of moving out of our area. It pushed through southern Caswell and northern Alamance. At this time, temperatures fairly comfortable. They're in the mid-70s, and honestly, the humidity could be worse. At this point, dew points are in the mid-60s, and they should be falling even a little more than that going into tomorrow. So here's your plan. I think Friday's really a great day of weather. A bit lower humidity than today. We're in the mid-60s in the morning, upper 80s for tomorrow afternoon. So it's still toasty, but it's not sticky to go along with that. I don't have any threat, any chance at all of rain for Friday evening. We'll call for a high of 86 degrees going into tomorrow. Of course, the weekend is upon us after that. I'm expecting heat. Low chances for storms, but we got to talk a little bit about the dust. I'll mention what it might be able to do for our sunrise and sunset, and if you need to worry about the air quality.
All right, probably the first time you've been asked this, but have you seen a firefighter helmet lying around? A Greensboro firefighter is looking for his. It looks just like this one, but it has a ladder shield on the front of it. The department posted on Facebook asking folks to join in the search. The helmet belongs to Xander Gainey. He's been with the department for about 5 years now. He says he realized it was missing after some training sessions.
I'm kind of past the point of I'm hoping it comes back in one piece. You know, it would be awesome if it came back in one piece, but if it came back in 10 pieces or 100 pieces, you know, it's still that sentimental value that I have with the helmet.
Well, the helmet was last seen somewhere between Market Street and Wendover Avenue. Gainey says the search may seem silly, but everyone has their sentimental thing, and he'd hate to lose his.
54,000 coronavirus deaths came from nursing homes, and their families are fed up.
My father would not have died this year if it hadn't been for COVID.
Stories from the hardest hit places of the pandemic. Next.